We're doing things that are good for us, and we're doing things that are bad for us. And how does the human brain and heart work when we're doing things that are really bad for us? What's the process? What's our internal mental process that allows us to do things that are bad for us? And let's use a very simple, neutral example so we don't get too caught up in emotions. So, do we all agree that essentially smoking is bad for you?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. Do you think that if you took 10,000 smokers and you put them in a room and you asked them, honestly, what do you know about smoking? Is it bad for you? What would the 10,000, out of the 10,000, how many do you think would say, yeah, I really know it's bad for me?
All of them.
Both.
Almost everybody. Not you'll never get 100%, but pretty much everybody will say it's bad for me. So, what's the process that happens in that human being's brain that says to that person, I am going to smoke. I know it's bad for me. Now, some of them, they just don't care about themselves. So I just don't care. But many of them, if you ask them a second question, do you know if smoking is bad for you? They say, we know it's bad for you. They say, do you really care about yourself and your health? And let's say out of the 10,000, let's for argument's sake, 9,000 say, I really care about my health. So what's the psychology of those 9,000 people who are smoking that allows them to go ahead and do that? I want you to try to put your finger on it and define it without getting too philosophical, just keeping it on the down low, simple human being. What is going on in your brain?
They don't see it. They don't see the result.
But you know it's bad for you.
Eventually, could be, maybe.
But they know that that's a rationalization. It could be, maybe, they know it's bad for them.
Correct. But
So
they don't dig that deep into it. Meaning this cigarette right now won't kill me. I'm not going to.
But they know that they're a smoker.
Right, but this one, I'm not going to die from this cigarette.
Right?
But what is cognitive dissonance? What is that?
Yeah.
What is that ability to deny truths that we know? And by the way, if you can crack this, it will change your life.
That's the power of the mind.
If there's one thing that could change your life like nothing else, if you could crack this, it will be life transformative in everything that you do in your life.
That's the power of the mind.
So what is that power? You're giving me ideas. I like them. I'm not disagreeing with them, but I want to understand those ideas. I want to put my finger on it. What is that process going on in my brain that allows me to actually light up the cigarette? What happened that allows me to light up the cigarette? Or
Instead of lighting cigarettes, it's the process of getting immediate pleasure versus long-term pain. Far off, something possibly could happen. And then once you do it again and again, it's saying a hergel na'aseh, it just becomes second nature, and you don't think about it. Because right now
we have the ability to deny reality. We got to put your finger on it. There's reality. Everything you're saying is about how we can deny reality. So we have to add an assumption to a human being. Just like a regular human being has 2 hands, 10 fingers, 2 legs, 2 feet, 10 toes, and a brain and a heart, every human being has the capacity to deny reality. And we have to recognize that ability to deny reality in ourselves. Chazal have an amazing statement that kind of ties into this. Ein adam chayta. Anybody want to finish the statement? So let's pop into the Parsha for a minute, and then we're going to come back to this, and we're going to see how this really works in the psychology. But anyone want to read to me, Pasuk Yud Beis, this in this week's Parsha? Just read it to me, and let's hold off on the Rashi for the moment. Just the Pasuk.
Devar el b'nei Yisrael v'yamarta leichem ish
Okay, so speak to the Jews, say to them, anybody whose wife, kitishta ishto. So what is the literal meaning of kitishta ishto? By the way, and let's digress just for a moment. You ever read about, like, let's say, they used to write about Gaddafi. What would they say about him? He's a madman, right? He's crazy. The Ayatollahs, they're crazy. They'd say Hitler, he was crazy. Do you think that Hitler was crazy? Saddam Hussein, let's use him as an example. What was Saddam Hussein crazy?
Probably not.
No, he knew how to control that.
I'm sorry?
Absolutely not.
He was not. He was a rational guy. He was completely rational. And Idi Amin, was he crazy?
Nope.
He was eating human beings out of his fridge.
So, does it make you crazy?
Doesn't make you crazy. He actually was, use a better word than crazy, one word, a short word. He was evil. Hitler was not crazy, he was evil. One of the worst things we could do about someone who's evil is call them crazy. Why is that? Why is that so bad to call somebody crazy when he's actually evil?
You give him the benefit of the doubt.
Well,
You know
you're
what I mean?
worse than that. I think worse than that is you're implying that that's not me. I'm normal. I can never do that. He's crazy. You know, I don't know if you guys ever read about Adolf Eichmann. And you ever hear of Hannah Arendt, The Banality of Evil? You guys ever hear that term? Everybody know any history here? Let me see if I can put it up on screen for you. There we go. I'll put it up on screen. Can you see my screen, my Google?
Hold on 1 sec. I'm just going to put it on my computer. Let's see.
Recording in progress.
Anybody heard the term banality of evil? When Eichmann was put on trial in Jerusalem in the 60s, people thought they would see a monster. They would see a crazy guy with like blood coming out of him with big teeth or some Nazi Superman. And instead he was a relatively ordinary bureaucrat. He was a regular, simple guy. He had a job, he came to his office, and he actually wasn't crazy.
He asked the president for a pardon.
He wasn't crazy. He was evil. And we do a disservice when we say someone's crazy, he's a meshugana, rather than saying no, he's not crazy, he's evil.
So I say that we say people are crazy when we don't understand them.
Or we want to separate ourselves. We want to rationalize it. We want to explain how in the world could he do that? Jeffrey Dahmer, we say he was crazy.
No, because we don't understand it.
I think it's more than that. I think it's like
Adolf Eichmann. When you put it in that term, I can understand. Yes, okay, he's evil. He's not crazy. But if I can't put in that term and I have to put a term to it, it's crazy.
Yeah. I think it's a protective mechanism that we like to use that allows us to say, I would never be like that. Those guys, they're crazy.
Correct.
They're crazy, but I'm not crazy, so I would never do that.
Correct.
And that's again the term of the banality of evil. I want to just jump back in here. So let's see what Chazal said. Chazal said, Isha ki tista. What is this word tista? What is the meaning of the word tista?
Here it says foolishly.
What? Well, yeah, but it's a bad translation.
All right. Shaita.
Tista, iste. So what does that mean, tista? Anybody want to try to translate that? Tista. What does that literally mean? So let's jump into Rashi, and this brings us to the crux of it, and then we'll have a nice discussion. And you want to read the Rashi? Go ahead, Chaim Baruch, loud.
Which Rashi? The
Tista Ishtay.
Kisista Ishtoi.
What is the word
Shani-
tista? Is milashon
If
shaita.
his wife will go astray, Shani Rabbi Seinu, our rabbis have taught, ain't
Speak up, Chaim Baruch.
Shani Rabbi Seinu, our
Rabbis
rabbis have
taught
taught,
us,
ain't hamenu afin noi afin.
if you're having an affair with your neighbor's
Adulterers-
wife, Billy Joel, they got an article about him today because he's dying. He said his greatest regret was he had an affair with his best friend's wife. He said, I don't know why I did it. I just, like he was living in his best friend's house and he had an affair with her and it wrecked his best friend's marriage. He tried to commit suicide after that. It was the worst mistake he made in his life.
Ain't hamenu afin noi afin. Adulterers do not commit adultery until a spirit of foolishness enters
No,
them.
shtus is not foolishness. Sorry. I'm not who you're translating.
Yeah,
The word shtus means shaita. What is a shaita?
an idiot.
He's crazy. He's an idiot.
Yeah.
So what do they mean? What do the rabbis mean when they say that in fact it is a form of insanity to go ahead and do things that you know are bad for you? Who's this lady that we're talking about? Anyone want to tell me who the Saita lady is? What her story is? How do you become a Saita? Anybody know the halacha how you become a Saita?
I thought it's an accusation by the husband.
So any lady whose husband says, I think you're cheating, she's a Saita?
I think that you have to have witnesses.
Okay.
Had to be warned.
It had to be warned. So what was she warned from?
Having an adulterous relationship.
Having those relations. So actually in halacha, this Saita is a very interesting lady. She was alone with the man. She was miyachid. I mean, she was alone with the guy. And her husband found out about it. Otherwise, you're not a Saita. And the husband then says to the wife, I want to warn you never to be alone with this man again. She went up into a hotel. They were a couple was in Vegas. And she went up into a hotel room with another guy, and she was alone with him. And the husband says to her, hey, you can't do that. You cannot be alone with Joe. And what does she do?
Does it again.
She does it again. This is the Saita that the Torah is talking about. So how would you describe this woman and what's going on inside of her?
You got caught. What are you doing?
You got caught. What are you doing? So what?
Roch shtus.
Rosh. So what is that Rosh?
Idiot.
So I'd like to just give you a simple thing. Insanity, the definition of insanity is
Doing
denial of consequences. That is the definition.
I thought it was doing something thinking there'll be a different outcome.
Right, well that's the same thing. You think a different outcome, you're denying the real
Yeah,
consequences.
okay.
I think the rabbis are telling us a very interesting idea. That sin, the problem with sin is not the misdeed that you're doing. It's allowing a spirit of irrationality. What's evil,
Thank you.
what's evil about doing something wrong, what's evil about having an affair on your husband or on your wife, or cheating or lying or stealing, or smoking, or doing other things that are harmful to you, what's wrong with them is not the action in of itself. What makes you, in a sense, evil is the fact that you allowed yourself to be consumed by a force that is not a rational force. And that's your choice. Your choice is not the smoking. Your choice is not the woman. In fact, I want to share what the Rambam says about people who cheat on their spouses. It's an amazing Rambam. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. Anybody want to read this? This is the great Maimonides. I want to give it a shot. Any takers?
There's no Nakudos, so I'm gonna.
You're going to pass. we say in another place. Go on.
The things over it. Someone has said Menafim.
The adulterer does not commit adultery. Ruach Shtos, until the spirit of insanity is overcoming him. And what does he go on and says? V'zeh emes, this is truth. Ki be'eis hataiva, at the point that you're in the room with the woman and you're overcome with desire, and the same thing for anything that we do that's wrong. This is one example. It's just an example. Ki be'eis hataiva, eis hataiva shatia. Whatever taiva it is that you're facing, will I finish this up, please? Eina seichel shalom. We're no longer rational. We human beings are rational. We have the capacity to be irrational. And when we are doing something that's wrong, when you're in that moment, you are no longer have a brain. You had a brain, you have 10 fingers, you still have 10 fingers, you still have 2 feet, but you don't have a brain anymore. You have a brain, a physical brain, but you don't have a rational brain.
The rational brain, what you should have used to get you till there, but once you're there,
once you're
in the strip club, it's over.
You've lost your spirit of rationality.
Right. The spirit of rationality was: do I go or do I not go? And that's where you have to. That's the avoid. No, right. I don't. You know.
Right.
But once you're there, once you're in that room, it's yeah.
Right. So in fact, what the Rambam is saying is that the sin is allowing a spirit of irrationality to overcome you, and that's spirit of irrationality. I'm just going to get that back here.
Yeah, but that's not the only sin.
Well, that's the core of evil. The core of evil is not the action. The Nazi who becomes a Nazi and then becomes a concentration camp killer, he's just doing what everybody else does. He's a regular guy now. He gets his job, he gets up in the morning, he goes back to sleep at night. It's what everybody does. And you see how people get conditioned to evil. Even mass murderers, the way they get conditioned is once they're in that situation, there's nothing to stop them. What's that?
The Umsprach.
The Umsprach
was to condition them.
To condition them.
Language.
The conditioning was the nature. Exactly. With evil is when you allow yourself to be conditioned. We'll talk about how we allow ourselves to be conditioned in a moment. But the action itself is not what's evil. And just quote this Rambam again. You can't say the action itself
is not evil because you can't say his nus is not evil.
Well, you're crazy at that point. Technically, you have the insanity defense. In other words, technically, one can argue, if the rabbis tell us
so
that...
you're saying Hitler was also crazy?
Well, what the rabbis are saying is that really at that moment you're not rational. And to read you the Rambam, you're not thinking straight. So how can you charge someone with a crime if the person wasn't thinking straight?
So you go from evil to crazy.
You have to go to cause. You go from
Correct.
evil, exactly. You go from evil to crazy.
The cause
the
is
cause
the evil.
The cause of craziness is evil.
That was my time. Then let me pause it. I don't want this on camera.
Story about when he got arrested falsely for allegedly having beaten a guy to give a get to his wife. But anyway, back to the Rambam.
But the
I'm
cause,
just going to read this Rambam again. An adulterer, someone who's committing an action of adultery or of other forms of immorality, you don't do it till there's a ruach shtus in you. Till you talk, you are insane. To the moment of insanity, because that emes, the Rambam elaborates. In the time of taiva, shatia, whether it's overeating food, or it's smoking, or it's being abusive to your wife, or not being nice to your kids, whatever you're doing, in that moment of desire, ein ha-seichel shalom, your seichel is not whole. So the root is, Chazal telling us, you should know when you're going to mess up, it's going to be a moment of insanity. You're going to have a temptation you can't withstand. And the solution for it is not sanity. The solution is not to allow yourself to lose your sanity in the first place. And you lose your sanity by a lack of will. I'm just going to show you the Gemara. If you guys can see this Gemara here. Sorry, we got to the Gemara. There we are. Rish Lakish says, Ein Adam, his definitive statement. Ein Adam Oira Aveira. No human being does something wrong. Elim ken nichlas baruch shtus, unless first a spirit of insanity, of lack of rationality, as the Rambam says. where you don't have seichel, where you're like a child enters you. And we learned that from the word tiste ishte, tiste ksiv, meloshin shoita, that you're a shoita. I should have one more thing. We'll do the Shulchan Aruch in a minute, but just to come back to this. So I think the process that we go through is that when we're in a bad situation, we're not recoverable at that point in time. But we have to build up our willpower so that we don't lose the rationality in the first place. And we do that by building up our spiritual willpower. And the more willpower you have, the less chance you have of losing yourself, which then once you lose yourself, you're truly not going to be able to control yourself. So you read about people who are doing bad things. Again, I read today about Billy Joel. You know, I always knew that morally he was a very flawed guy. I didn't really know much about him, but he said, look, you know, I tried to kill myself a couple of times, he says. And the reason is because I did this terrible thing is I destroyed my family. I destroyed my friend's family. I took advantage of him. I betrayed him, and I really ruined his life. And he ruined his own life. He says it was a terrible thing that he did. I'm not sure that he learned the lesson because he ended up marrying her years later. She divorced her husband, then he married her, but then he divorced her because obviously he couldn't sustain a relationship with her either. He probably cheated with the next person. But the idea of Judaism is not about avoiding sin. It's about learning to be in control of yourself and learning not to allow yourself to be in a situation where you lose your spirit of rationality. I'll show you something real interesting, real fast, and kind of like maybe close on this a little bit. But this is about Natilas Yadayim. You guys all do Natilas Yadayim?
Yes.
Okay, so let me see if I can pull it up with a translation. Let's see. Okay, yeah, we got it. Okay, this is Natilas Yadayim. The following things require washing the hands. When you get out of bed in the morning, you wake up, you go out of the bathroom, you go to the bathhouse, you cut your nails, you take off your shoes, you touch your feet, wash your head, it goes among the dead, touches the dead. If you're touching lice, if you sleep with your wife, you're touching another form of lice on your body. If you touch your body, if you don't do it, if you're a Torah scholar, you're going to forget your studies. If you're not a scholar, the Shulchan Aruch says, Yotze midaita, you lose a little bit of your rationality. Why would the Shulchan Aruch say that not washing Natilas Yadayim causes you to lose your rationality? What's the association one to the other? What does not washing your hands have to do with rationality? So I didn't wash my hands. Why can't I be totally rational, not have to wash my hands?
So first, what's on your hands is a tumah. Not even.
But what is that? So what is that?
It's not even tangible.
It's not even tangible.
Right.
And Mr. Burr just quotes this, Nislavish Baruch Shtus, and that allows you to come to an Avera, Avera. Person does not during the wrong element can Baruch Shtus. It's just the Mr. Burr's explanation of the Shulchan Aruch.
Again, what's coming to mind, I don't know how logical it is, but if Chazal tell you to do something relatively simple, and you're going to defy it for whatever reason, you're already starting on the wrong track. Like, what does it take? You wake up in the morning, you're washing your hands. You know what I mean? You're going to shul to daven, so go to the sink and wash your hands. Why? You know what I mean? It's not where we're asking you to do something complicated.
Right.
The second you already gave up on that, you're already on the wrong train.
Right.
I don't know. That's
yeah. I kind of like that. I think also all of these are like intense physical states, either in yourself or in others. So when you're sleeping, you're in an intense physical state. You don't have rationality when you're sleeping. In fact, you could be sleeping and you could hit someone, you could knock something over. You're totally unaware. It's an intense physical state. Okay. When you're in the bathroom also, it's a very physical state. I'll never forget, it's not so clean and nice, but I was once in a truck stop in one of these southern states where there were no doors to the bathrooms. I don't know if you guys ever seen the old days. these old truck stops, and I walk in, there's like 30 truckers, and they're all sitting, on their toilets, and they're eating sandwiches because they're. I don't know if you've ever seen that, like. Right, you go to the bathroom, like, and you're eating a sandwich. Like, how physical can you get? Of course, we don't eat in the bathroom because you don't want to be in such a physical state. You want to maintain your human dignity. So all these things are kind of like an intense physical side. Certainly, being among the dead, sleeping with your wife, and even touching your body. Those are physical states. So we kind of want to separate ourselves and maintain awareness that we're not just physical beings. So the purpose of Netilas Yadayim is a separation, that I am not just a physical being. I have a physical side, but I'm really not just a physical being. So I have a body, but if I touch my body, I'm washing my hands because I'm not just a physical being. I went to sleep, I'm washing my hands, I was in a state of intense physicality. I want to kind of like separate myself from it. It's a way of understanding Torah. And when we wash our hands, it's our mental way of saying, hey, I'm completely separate from it. If you don't separate yourself from your intense physicality, you lose your rationality because your body's not rational. Your body just wants its satisfactions. Your body in and of itself doesn't have a thing. So I think the association of the Shulchan Aruch is an interesting one. If you allow your intense physicality to consume you and you can't separate yourself from it. So if you're a scholar, you're going to forget your Torah because the Torah is meant to separate you from it. And if you don't know Torah, you're going to begin to lose your rationality because, like, what separates me from an animal? I'm just another animal. There's a lot in Judaism about living kind of like living a Torah lifestyle. Is we don't want to be intensely physical. So some examples are, we don't eat in the marketplace. They're very easy things to do. We don't eat in public. You don't eat while sitting in the shuk. Chazal describes someone who eats in the marketplace as the shuk. What do the Chazal say? Hi. It's like a dog. It's like an intent. Don't be a dignified human being. We recognize we have to eat, but we have to eat at the table, sanctify the eating. You have to go to the bathroom. Don't be on the phone when you're going to the bathroom. Don't mix your rational human self with your physical self. Separate it out. Keep it separate. Keep it private. That's why we don't sleep with a woman in public. It's private. We have a physical side. It's a very important side to our lives, but it has its role in place, and it's not meant to represent who we are. When you sleep, you wash Netilas Yadayim, and you get up. You go to the bathroom, you wash your hands. We're separating ourselves from our intense physical state. The more we're able to do that, the more we remember who we are as human beings. We're spiritual beings, we're souls, and these are techniques that allow us to separate ourselves from what we call Toma. Toma really is a human being without spirituality. So we say that if you're asleep, it's like a form of Tama, because it's a human being without spirituality. Certainly a dead person is Tame, because it's a human being without any spirituality, because there's no soul associated with it. By the way, what happened to the Saita if she was innocent? I have a question for you guys, a good question.
She had kids.
It was a blessing for her. Why would she get a blessing? I mean, we just said the woman, yeah, but
you're
still,
saying but the fact is she was in a room with someone.
She went up to the hotel room in Vegas. Come on in, Shazalik. You go walk right in. When she went in the hotel room with the guy in Vegas,
And she did it again.
her husband said, "Don't do it," and the next day she walked right back in.
Right,
So why would she get a
drop
blessing for that?
Right. No.
Why would the waters be a blessing for her?
Okay.
Fair question, right? You heard the first part?
Why would she get a blessing for?
First, you heard the first about rationality and all?
Yeah, I was listening.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
I didn't see what's on. Why would you get a blessing if look, we know she has moral failings. She has moral weaknesses. She went ahead and she went up to the hotel room. My husband said, "Don't do it." She did it again. Clearly, she's got stuff
Because
going on
even in the
life.
moment of insanity,
She's not the Rebbitzin, let's just say.
because even in the moment of insanity, she had Siyata Deshmaya that watched over her. I don't know.
Why would that be a blessing?
Right? Why?
Why blessing? again, we said that sin, the problem with sin is not the action. The problem with sin is that you
Gets you
allowed
there.
rationality to leave you. Really, you lost your humanity. When you do that, that's when you lose your humanity. You're no longer rational. But Chazal telling us nobody sins. There's a definitive statement from Chazal. Nobody sins unless they lost their rationality. Right, so that means you're really, in America, you wouldn't even be liable. It's like the insanity defense. And we know how offensive it is when we say it was insane. It was evil. We know it's evil. What do they mean by this? They're telling us that, of course, when you're sinning, you're not rational. When the husband comes home and he finds his wife sleeping with another guy and he shoots them both, he's not rational at that point. Even law recognizes that. It's like it's a different level of homicide. You know, it's different. The problem is you let yourself get to a state in which you're not rational. That is the heart of evil. So now this woman, she let herself get into that state. She did it twice. Second time was against her husband. I told her, I know what's going on. I know you and Joe, you should not be hanging out together. This is a bad situation. And yet she gets blessed when she drinks the cider water. We're not saying, why would she get blessed?
Never carries.
End of the day, she was able to maintain a level of moral restraint in a bad situation. She fell. She made the mistake. She messed up. And she went back into the room. But in the big picture, she was able to maintain a moral restraint.
Twice.
Twice. You see, what you did was wrong. You were embarrassed in front of everybody, sight and all that. Everybody knows that you did things that are wrong. But at the end of the day, the human being who's able to recover their sense of self-control, their rationality. So, this is wrong. I'm not going to do it.
So it's not the relationship that's usa, it's the actual masa that's usa.
It's the loss of rationality. It's when this is what it means to abandon your humanity. When Eichmann murdered people, he didn't actually murder anybody. He just pushed paper. But even if he would have murdered people, that's of course a horrible, horrible crime. But the human flaw is that you allow yourself, as you talk about conditioning, you allow yourself to be conditioned. You allow yourself to get into that situation. And if I don't want to get too personal, but all of us get ourselves into situations in life to close out on this. We close with the following thought. We get ourselves into situations in life where we develop patterns of behavior in that situation. And we're conditioning ourselves over and over to allow that pattern of behavior. And those patterns of behavior, we become desensitized. So, for example, the Isser Lashon Hara. Even if a couple's going through a divorce, it's an Isser Lashon Hara. B'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha. It's a very hard mitzvah. Imagine a couple's getting divorced. B'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha. You gotta love each other. How do you do that? You love each other like yourself, and yet you're in the middle of it. You're fighting with each other. You're in a business dispute with somebody. B'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha. It's a rabbi you don't like in your shul. It's a guy building apartments next to your father's house somewhere, on Forest Avenue, Lakewood, and there's all this stuff going on in you, and you're like, we condition ourselves.
There's a Rambam.
Yes.
The Rambam on B'ahavta l'reacha kamocha actually says this. He says that the idea of what does B'ahavta l'reacha kamocha mean? Why does it say B'ahavta esrei kamocha? L'reacha means that even though you have disputes with him, even though you have differences, when you're going into his simcha, when you're actually being, you're happy with him, whatever is happening in his life right now, at that moment, forgive him. It's the word fagin. I don't know the English words for it.
Right. Fagin is the right English word, yeah.
It's forgiving him that moment of the shidduch, that moment of having an einikel, that moment. Don't take in all the other things that encompass, your past and futures and.
Right. Don't bring them to the table.
Don't bring them to the table. Keep it very clear on.
Don't bring those other things to the table. I'm just pulling up the Ramban.
It's Kisaitza?
It's in Vayikra. I'll put it up on screen for those who want to see it. There we go. Read the Ramban. V'tam, let's go through Ushazoli's Ramban. V'hat l'recha kamoicha, ki lo yikabo leva adam she'evas chaveri kavos es nafshay. And we say chayecha kaitman, how can you love someone like yourself? So he says, mitzvah satayra sheyav chaveri in every matter, kasher yoevas nafshay b'chol atad, you want only the good for them. You want the good for them. You're angry at the guy, but you want that good for him.
Right. Don't mix it.
You want that person to have good.
Because it's not. It's like it would be very hard. Yeah, it's a very hard.
Want to do as much good to the other as you want to do to yourself.
Right. Again.
My friends, you have a beautiful Shabbos.
You would be